All right, welcome to today's episode of the Growth Podcast. My name is Aaron Civitarese, and I am here with my guest today, Steve Van Zutphen. Yes, and he is an entrepreneur, a lawyer, a technologist, and he is the founder of the Futbal app and the Futbal coin, which is something that's absolutely revolutionary and very cool in the blockchain space. And I'm super excited to have him on here today. Steve, welcome to the Growth Podcast, man.
Thanks, Aaron. Good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. This is exciting, man. I love this stuff. So you and I were catching up slightly before we jumped on here, talking about some mutual friends and stuff, which we'll get into in a sec here. But for the listeners who don't know you quite as well as I do, who is Steve? Tell us just a little bit about yourself, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so I've had a kind of a strange background that's been a big benefit to this project because, as you know, they describe crypto as everything that you don't know about money mixed with everything that you don't know about technology. And this is mostly true. These are really confusing subjects. And then we've married that with, social media. Not that many people people know how to use social media, but they don't understand the metrics that grow a company like that. But the unique background that I had was I studied undergraduate. It was more philosophy and history, and then I went on to law school, and I specialized in intellectual property law. So I had to learn to code and build systems just so that you could represent clients who maybe had technology stolen. You had to know the technology, and I did really well with that, and moved on to building a software company in Chicago that was formed around selling complex software to associations, membership associations, which is kind of boring, but it's a lucrative area. And then I took a few years off because I retired from that when I was about 27, I think, and wrote some books and did some charitable things, and then got the itch to get into development myself. So I kind of went from being a lawyer, then a tech founder, to really becoming a coder, and spent quite a few years really honing that craft, and then built a kind of a massive data system. So I kind of descended down the rungs, I guess you could say, right, to go from hotshot lawyer to nerdy coder, as a background.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that brought you to where you are today. I don't want to jump too far ahead and talk about the Futbal coin quite yet, because I'm sure there's quite a story behind how that all came about and where that started and all these things. And sort of where the ideas came from for this sort of a project, because it's not something you just throw together, it's a massive undertaking. So it's very cool. When you were transitioning back in the day, when maybe the listeners who are on a growth path of their own and they're moving between different areas of life, right? So you went into, you went from in the tech startup to being a coder, and that's a transition you had to make that probably affected did you take a hit on your ego at all, for lack of better words, where you felt like you were going down the rungs, you mentioned, right? That's an interesting way to put it. How did that go about for someone who's listening who might be like, well, I want to do this, but it might not be accepted the way other people are looking at it, or other people's viewpoints on things. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I wasn't paying much attention to how it was perceived from, whether I was going up or down the career ladder, but I just felt an incredible sense of empowerment when I started to code. And, for people who don't code, that world is a mystery. And it, even more so 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it was, a kind of a club that if you either could code or you couldn't. And if you couldn't code, you relied on those guys and their opinions. And if they told you something couldn't be done, well, then it couldn't be done. There was no way to do it. So because I had great ambitions for the kind of things I wanted to build, once I started hiring a lot of guys that were telling me it can't be done, I was curious as to whether it could be done, and just started to teach myself to code. And I found it absolutely incredible and empowering to be able to just kind of break through to the other side and be able to take all the things that were in my head and start directly to create them. So it was one of the most exhilarating experiences for me, because I was full of ideas of things to create, and I no longer had to depend on anybody. There was nothing standing between my ability to do it. I could think it and I could create it.
Yeah, I feel you on that. You're actually stepping into your power as a conscious creator. Really, you could create what you wanted to, and it was like you're a painter with a blank slate, and you had the tools now, right? And
Yeah,
you could paint
it's
that art piece.
exactly. It's a manifestation process, and so it's taking those big ideas and making them tangibly real, and there's less barriers between your ability to do it. And I think this has been one of the reasons why most good tech projects have come from a founder that can code. I think it's may change in the future, but it's almost impossible to build a good tech company if you can't code. You might have a couple of coders as well that are superstars, but if you look at who succeeded in the tech industry, they all had their hands in the code. And I think it's just because you can do something, what I would call, multi-dimensional refactoring. That means you can run through the whole cycle and you can think, I could either change the code, I can change my marketing, or I can change how I sell this to the customer. There's a lot of layers where you can make changes. You don't have to have a committee meeting, and you can see a lot more of the landscape of what you're trying to accomplish, which is not technical. You're trying to build something technical, market it, get some traction on it, and you just have to communicate inside your left brain to your right brain. There's no committees, there's no politics, there's no tech guy saying, or tech women saying, no, can't do it. Not that there's something wrong with them, but it's just, it's a communication issue, and there's no communication issue. The throughput is 100%. So I absolutely loved that empowerment. And I think that was the foundation for being able to create some of the technologies that we've now kind of thrilling people with.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Complete sense. The analogy of going to a board of directors for a decision rather than just making the decision on your own and making it happen. You actually have the tool to make it happen, so you can streamline the entire process, right? And get the art piece out there as you see it fit, not with other outside influences that might not understand it as well, right? That's very cool. I get it. That's interesting. So let's talk about the blockchain for a second then. Your projects are revolving around the blockchain big time. So what do you think about the blockchain? I mean, I know what I think about it, and I'm pretty sure I have a good idea what you think about it, but what's your opinion on this whole blockchain world?
Well, I think, there's two elements to the blockchain. One is the blockchain as a technology itself, which can be used to create tokens, or the blockchain kind of as a weak database used in different kind of problem solving in banks and whatnot. So I think the technical side of the blockchain is a bit boring. It's just kind of an interesting idea, but the social change that can be created by having systems, tokenized economic systems that are free from government interference and that have this built-in trust, because we don't have to trust anybody, which everybody knows these basics, but they're incredibly profound. And I think they're more profound than even the people who are the biggest advocates in the industry think they are. I mean, I think that we haven't had any kind of societal shift to the degree where the blockchain is going to shift to the society since democracy in the golden age of Greece, where that idea was radical at the time. It's very logical to us now, but imagine how radical that would have been back in those days, when either a priest or a king, says God puts this leader or this pharaoh or this, somebody, and then some people out in the hills of Athens some thinkers say, well, we're going to select our own leader. And people are thinking, what? You can't select your own leader, your own king. Who gives you the right? You don't have the power. You can't do that. And the Greeks were even further along, and they said, we're not selecting a king, we're selecting just a leader, a representative. Yeah. So this was incredibly radical and transformed Western civilization. However, you can't really mix a democratic political system with a Babylonian money system, which is the thing that we've been facing as a culture for 7,000 years. Yeah, it's almost a 7,000-year tyranny, unbreakable tyranny, because each generation is born into that machinery. And even the things that we hear about, the biblical time of Christ and whatnot. And there was a lot of anti-money system rebellions going on 2,000 years ago. And they weren't able to be effective because there was no way to actually create a tokenized system outside the control of the government. So all they could do was protest, and even the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our debts. For sure, what they were talking about wasn't, well, I know it's controversial, but to me, it wasn't sins per se. It was debts. There was a debt slavery system that was overwhelming the society. And that even went back to that the system of money that we have today is even more tyrannical than it existed in Babylon. Yeah. Back in those days, you had a debt jubilee, which would mean that once enough debt was accumulated, usually the leader, when they put their son in, would do a debt forgiveness. This was strategic. It was politically strategic. You would weaken the guys with money. You would, all the people would be grateful for the new leader and accept him because their debts were forgiven. But somehow in the evolution of that money system, they stopped the debt forgiveness part, which led to those big protests 2,000 years ago. And the combination of those, really led to the dark ages, really, and the feudal system. So actually, if you look at it from a historical context, this blockchain and people's willingness to make a market out of that, kind of the 10 million heroes of Bitcoin who really created this, made it real, and whoever were the geniuses behind the actual mechanism of those blockchains, which to me, as they apply to the creation of tokens, that where you can measure economic wealth, it's absolute genius. So, I'm really jazzed. Absolutely, man. I mean, I'm really jazzed about the level of societal transformation. I think many people, they don't even realize it yet. They don't realize the power they have and how this is going to evolve. And it doesn't matter, one step at a time, yeah? But I do feel that I have a little bit of vision as to how this may play out. And I feel that's been a big advantage for the projects that we're doing, that I see some of the evolution of how this will play out and how to compete in that market and be sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, amazing. History lesson. I love it. I just forgot I didn't have my Bitcoin hat on. Thanks for reminding me. Yeah. On a side note, I love wearing this hat around when I travel in the airports and stuff. People are always, it's such a good conversation starter. Sitting in the lounges before the flight or whatever, someone will like, hey, what's that? What's going on there? And it's such a good conversation starter. I love it. Even at the check-in desks at places, I'm like, they're like, is that Bitcoin? I said, yeah. Do you accept Bitcoin here? They're like, oh, I wish. I'm like, me too.
Yeah.
It's funny.
It is. And the feeling you have of it, in the discussions when you ring it up, it's almost like St. Paul versus, there is an element of, it's such a radically new idea, and it's so exciting and empowering. I think that, rock and roll had that element in the 60s, but, even more in the historical context, whatever happened at the time of Christianity, and it's all covered in fog, but something was happening back in those days that was so powerful, some idea that people were electrified by it. And that is what's happening a little bit with the Bitcoin, and it's amazing. And, so when people, and it's so black and white, isn't it? Like people, there's just certain areas where people get this totally. And then there's certain age groups and certain circles where it is completely crazy to them, and it makes no sense. It's so polarized, I guess, you know?
Extremely polarized, yeah. And of course, everything is, there's nothing without polarity. Polarity exists in every context there is, and it's extreme in the crypto and the blockchain
Yeah,
space. Like, it's extreme. um
it is.
you know
And I think even when you talk about that I think even the Bitcoin has gone a couple of steps into a little bit of edgy fanaticism as well. I think that I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin, but as I stand back and observe, the industry, there's a little bit of hidden fear, or that it's that there's not a weak spot in Bitcoin per se, but the ability for other ecosystems to come in and compete with that, right?
mm,
I sense a lot of kind of subconscious or conscious pushback by people who are very sensitive to think, yeah, we've created Bitcoin and we've made it to what it is. And they did, in fact, do that. And it's heroes work, and it's just incredible, right? They're the 300 of the, they are the legendary people that, were the people that held back the forces and allowed this to be created. But they're just paving the way for many, many new ideas to come in now, and other kinds of ecosystems that could even be more powerful and more broadly held. And some of them will be by people that we might not be rooting for. Some of those might be existing big brands that create these next generations, but certainly there will be also some new thinking there, some more organic, community-based thinking that allows very big crypto ecosystems, even bigger than Bitcoin. I mean, I run into that a lot, that everybody, because the numbers are big. Yeah. I mean, the numbers are big around Bitcoin, like
mm,
200 billion. It's a giant number for crypto, and 130 or 140 billion for Bitcoin.
mm.
These numbers are huge, right? I mean, that's almost getting close to the size of JP Morgan Bank, which is a 100-year tyrannical institution that has just committed layers and layers of compound crime to keep their position. And just in 10 short years, kids essentially created a money system that rivals the wealth, and it exceeds it, and can exceed it. But yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. I don't want to. We if I get a little bit philosophical, I mean, we'll be here for a long time. So
I got all day, man. I love talking. The deeper it goes philosophically with this stuff, the better. I love it. I love it so much. And the audience does too. Everyone, I know my audience, and they're all in growth mindset, and they're all very open-minded when it comes to business, philosophy, the money system, all of these things. That's who these people are. They're just like us, so they
yeah,
love hearing this as well. So please don't be shy.
yeah.
Let's just divert for half a second, since you mentioned JP Morgan and this whole banking system and stuff. What's your thoughts on that, man? The central banks, the shit show that they've created. What do you think about all that stuff?
Well, it's just too much greed. They overplayed their hand, and I think the actual, owners of that system are a little more measured than the casino that, Wall Street created. They're almost ruining their party. But if you look at if people were to look at the sheer level of greed in the way that money system works, and this is one of in the philosophical points, some of the thing that I do really want to share some knowledge with people, that they're not thinking. We're caught up in a lot of isms in these days, socialism or communism or capitalism, and which one is better. And I think a better way to think of this is with less, a little bit abstraction, like an engineer thinking, what is the best way for money to be created and flow through the society, not related to a political system. And what these people did, and you have to give them credit for it, it's almost diabolically clever how they created the money system and how they sold it. I mean, it's amazing, really. But can you imagine, they got the levers of power. They wrote in a book. Yeah, they say money doesn't grow on trees. Of course it grows on trees, right? They write it in the book. That's how it was.
Quite literally.
Yeah, they just write it in.
Yeah.
They write it in the book. And rather than give it out to society, They loan it into existence so that you loan it into existence and it has to be paid back. Right away, I can tell you that's not a money system. That's a control system. And that is designed to be a control system. Because if you were just after money, you could very easily say, look, I'm going to write in the book, you know, $1 quadrillion, or what they actually have done, $256 trillion, going to write it in the book, and we're going to lend it into the world. Why lend it to the world? Isn't it enough if you give half of it to the world and you keep the other half? You know, isn't 100 and something trillion enough money for you, the creator of that existing money system? No, it is not. They want 100% of it, and that's not enough. They don't give a penny of it. They lend it, so you have to repay it. Now that creates a hypercharged economy, because it means that it means that people can't pay back the loans. It's a musical chairs game from the very beginning. There's no chance that everybody can pay back the money with interest, because that money does not exist. That means somebody's going to go bankrupt. They're going to have to come hat in hand back to the owners of the system or the other winning participants, give up their land, give up their assets, and enter some sort of financial slavery. So it's a wickedly clever system to create a kind of hypercharged economy, and it's a control system. Because, you know, if they had simply wanted to be rich, all they would have had to do was just keep half of the supply, like the alleged founder of Bitcoin or something, or keep a portion of the supply. You'd have plenty of money. Now, they're also using then financial leverage on top of that, you know, 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1, which is what every control system does. You know, if you can maintain a 100 to 1 or 1,000 to 1 leverage, you can stay in control. So again, I'm not a revolutionary, and, you know, I know good people who even work in these banks and systems. And, you know, some of them are very good people, but the system that they're working in is barbaric. And I think that we just, you know, so it's not us against them, you know. In a sense, we have to look at, like, where did we get this system, and does it need to be this way? And then there's a sense of fear on their part. What if they give up the levers of control? You know, what will happen to them? Because 100 years ago, life was a lot tougher than it is now. There's a lot of technological productivity now. Things are different. You know, there isn't this sense that if we don't, all get a shovel and dig, we won't be able to eat. There's a lot of technology, a lot of productivity, a lot of human energy flowing all around the world. So what also some of the education and outreach needs to be to the rich, saying, look, as these systems change, don't be scared of Bitcoin. They can't stop it. They can't stop the other tokenized systems that are going to come. But they'll still be rich. We just need to change the mechanism that tokens come into being. They need to come in through the community. So this is the era of community-based money, democratic money systems. And the flow of these, it should be given to people. They can either buy them or be given these tokens. And then once they're adopted, the rich will still be rich, won't they? If you provide a great service, you create a great business, you're going to still have more money, you know, and more enjoyment, because you provide a great service, and you should deserve that. There's nothing incompatible with that. But if the money's coming into existence through the people democratically, everybody will have resources, and the economy will flow in a much less volatile way, in a much less barbaric way. The rich can still be rich. We don't have to be scared that this universal basic income will just be, you know, everybody on the beach smoking pot. They will do that for a little while, right? I mean, for a little while, because we've been in thousands of years of being, you know, running and running and running, right? So maybe the first time that we experience some of the freedom, we might sit on the beach and smoke pot for 6 months. But at some point, we're going to get up and go, oh man, I have the freedom a bit to actually do something that I really want to do. What gets me motivated? What do I do that for others that gets me motivated? And everybody will find their groove, you know, about what they want to do. We need to give that enough time. So that sort of I'm trying to avoid the politics of the word universal basic income because it brings up all kinds of prejudices and stupidity. It's just money should be issued through the people, by the people, for the people.
Hmm.
And if we do that, in 60 years, when our grandchildren look back and talk to us or see a podcast like this, they'll say, look, this was, can you imagine, my great grandfather, he lived in that era of slave debt money. And they had, the same way we think about the people in the trenches of World War I with the mustard gas going, who the heck would go in a trench and just get gassed with another trench 80 meters away and
Yeah.
millions of guys in a trench? We would never do that now. But our kids will look back and say, hey, I'm glad that these Bitcoin people created the first kind of phalanx, to create an alternative, and that hopefully a lot more people like me will come out who do have more of a lateral view across economics, finance, politics, technology, who can say, hey, look, this thing, or people like me I can speak to the JP Morgan guy, I can get along with them, understand their mentality, and I totally understand the 23-year-old kid, who's like watching the YouTube videos and wants to, screw the Rothschilds, and we're creating a new world. It's great. They actually can find the way forward, with smarter, with better discussions about these topics and more intelligent debate about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. What a great perspective. But that's a very macro bird's eye view you gave there. I appreciate that. That's very good. It's so important to understand the macro of this whole thing, that it's brushed under the rug a little bit too much. People get caught up in the micro, like, I have my wallet with my own money. I don't have to go to the bank. Yeah, okay. But there's a massive thing happening here. And then the blockchain, like you say, it's not just about currency, right? It impacts all sorts of industries all around the world all the time.
Absolutely.
So it's crazy.
And when you look at the fundamentals, as you say, when you get down to the fundamentals of what's going on there, the macro, but there's just a few fundamental points. And if we articulate them well, and the education goes out about these points, is fundamentally, the idea that money has value independent. Yeah, this is almost a brainwashed perspective, right? That can be very easily challenged by any good philosopher or any good thinker who would, you talk to somebody who says, gold is money, and this is money, and that is money. Well, look, money is, and I credit Alan Watts with this perspective. If you've ever heard Alan Watts talk about money, it'll blow your mind. He's so clear. He was such a prophet about this, but it's very simple. Money is a measuring tape. Money is not wealth. You are the wealth. I am the wealth. What we do for each other, the work that we do, we are the economy. And whatever we choose to measure that wealth inherits the wealth. So of course, the attention of all the sharks in the world is on creating those tokens. So it's no surprise we've been in this kind of difficult situation. But now that we've seen that we can create tokenized economic systems, I don't want to use the word money. These are politically loaded terms, just, intelligent utility tokens or whatever. We can create systems where we can choose which ones to measure. And then the debate will then turn to, okay, that's cool. It's like, how do we allocate these tokens and how many of these systems should exist? And that will be the same debate that they had when they used to create, they were trying to choose gold versus silver versus shells versus salt. Yeah. What is the best measuring tape? You will tend to use the thing that is the most valuable or the best tool to hold the value. You won't pick something of no utility. I suspect they chose gold in the ancient days, partly because women loved it for jewelry, maybe men as well. Yeah, for sure, men as well. The priests wanted it for the temples. The kings wanted it for the palaces, and it was one of the most desired substances of scarcity. So we chose that as a tool. Then I'll just put this out on a bit of a flow for you to talk about that. We shifted in the modern economy. In 1974, we shifted from a kind of commodity-backed token system on the US dollar to a utility token. The dollar became a utility token. And what was its utility? Its advantage, its secret sauce, was that it was the only token that you could use to buy oil. And this gave it an unbelievable advantage over all other currency systems in the world. That if a country who needed to fuel the entire economy is fueled by oil, and if the only way to buy that oil was with the US dollar was had a monopoly on that. It was utility was for buying oil. Now that utility was in fact enforced by war and not by contract, which is why that is falling apart. It was not a sustainable model. It was, you could say, very bad to force countries that they have to sell without contract, sell oil for dollar. So now we're going to have to choose new utility tokens. The community will choose them. There will be many of them. There won't be, it'll be very similar to, let's say, what you have in the App Store. You have millions of apps, you have millions of tokens, but there'll only be about 100 that you will use. So if we're debating in 5 years in the future, you will start out the conversation by asking me, Steve, what are the tokens that you use and hold? And you'll tell me yours, and you'll be like, it'll be 20 that you use and 20 that I use, and we overlap half of them, you know? Mm. And so we're moving into like, utility-based models of, and their value comes from our adoption of them. We give them the value. And once people realize that, that token systems will take off like a rocket. Yeah, people haven't realized this yet. It's very much like, I don't know what city in Canada, I forgot to ask you which city you're in today, but if you go up in the Calgary Tower, the glass floor, or out in the mountains there, it's very psychologically intimidating if you're not an engineer to walk out over a glass floor in a tower. It's psychologically strange. But a good engineer could tell you, hey, look, you could take a jackhammer to that, and you can't break that glass. It's built in a way that it can't be broken, but it's still psychologically intimidating. People are still scared that Bitcoin has no value, if it's a psychological trick. So once people realize, well, look, I want to give it my value and I trust it. Other people trust it, and I'm going to give it the value will rocket. And it won't just be Bitcoin. It will be also other token systems will come into play. And when this happens, and I'm glad we can get this a little bit on the record, for people to see this will happen. And it'll happen faster than people can even believe it. It'll blow their minds. And all the people that you're trying to talk to about Bitcoin now and these days, it's like on the Titanic, before the thing hits the iceberg, trying to convince people, what's the best lifeboat is a tough job. But after the Titanic hits the lifeboat and is starting to, tilt, the nose is tilting up, every lifeboat is amazing. Every token is going to be amazing. Yeah. And I don't think we're far. And once you hit once it hits a tipping point of $1 trillion, at 200 billion now, once it hits $1 trillion, that's the psychological tipping point that will actually bring an avalanche that will take it up to 5 trillion. Once it's at that level, every large brand in the world, and that will happen very fast. Once it hits $1 trillion, it'll hit 5 trillion very, very fast. Because think, if $800 billion of new wealth is created, how many more stories of college kids and friends that made a lot of money? And they tell Uncle Joe and Aunt Sally at the next Thanksgiving, and it's going to happen again, and it's going to go up to $1 trillion. And then once that happens, then all the big brands are going to have to come in and play. How Libra tried to come in and play, and they got swatted back because their model was not good. They didn't have any support from the grassroots, real crypto community. They also didn't have any support from the traditional community because they were competing with them. So they had no friends, and they picked the wrong model. But maybe they'll come back again with another model, and you'll see the Apple token and the Mercedes token and the Amazon token and all these kind of things will come in, and it'll take, and then what'll happen, and this is why I'm laying the groundwork now, it won't be about tokens. Tokens will be flooded in. It'll be about how does money come into the world how are the tokens given out? Are they given out freely? Are they lent into existence? The way central banks want to now build digital token systems, and and then just use it the same old way that they're using it, or like what we're doing on our project, trying to show people kind of bridging ways. It's not the purest way that we could do it, but you have to work with the existing psychology of what people are willing, what they can absorb, just to let them taste the idea that they're creating their own unit of measurement for their own economic value.
Yeah, totally. That's what it's really all about. Hey, that's cool. So yeah, let's talk about your project, the Futbal app, the Futbal
Yeah.
token. Tell us about this thing, because this is absolutely amazing. I've been watching you guys. I mean, I didn't even want. We have a mutual friend who's part of this business, Jan Huditz. I say his name wrong also. Huditz is one of my buddies from back in the day, ski racing, right? Olympian, World Cup superstar. And when he told me the concept, I was like, oh my God, that's so smart, and I'm not going to get into it. Obviously you will, but I just have to say, well done, because it's genius. So tell us a little bit about this project.
Yeah. Well, it does now appear like a genius, but it's kind of a series of kind of accidents and coincidences that we ended up in the end, it looks like it was much more planned than it was. I wish I could take credit that it was my idea and this and that, but really it was just this weird collage of energies that created this thing that has now, it really does fit. And I do take some credit for steering it in the right direction, but really the origin of the idea was with Jan, who was very much about community give back. He had this foundation, Panda House, where he was helping other skiers, even people he was competing against, right? I mean, the guy, so he's a real heartfelt thing. Yeah,
amazing.
And he knew that I had the technical ability to create really powerful technologies, like I could create social networks with my team and the existing codes that we had, a decade of experience in this. So Jan said, look, how do I do this Panda House thing? I want to give back, but I don't have unlimited money. And so how do we is there some way you could invent a system how money could recycle through the community of skiing? And I told him right off the cuff right away, yeah, of course, you would just create a social network and for the skiing community, and share the revenue of that network with all the participants of the skiing community, so that it would just endlessly recycle money into the community. And then he said, of course, well, can you build it? And we did. I put some of my very, very top guys, and we designed and built the prototype version of the skiing app in 5 or 6 weeks. And we'd not yet embedded the token into the thing at this point. It was meant to just be at first a ad revenue share network, and I saw that this could really have legs. We felt like it needed more of a push, or it needed a bigger community to start with, and then we could retrofit it back into skiing, which is the nature of the skiers. They're outdoor people, they're not social media addicts, right? So I mean, it's a little bit of a harder place to get the initial traction, and also you're competing against Instagram, which is so well tuned that it takes a lot of time to really get up to that level or improve on Instagram to make something more compelling. But just the iterations then, I think the November 2017, when the post-Thanksgiving boom happened and Bitcoin shot up to 17,000, is the first time, not that I was followed and bought Bitcoin in 2012. I was buying it and I followed it, pretty early, but I wasn't convinced that all the heroes of Bitcoin could make it go mainstream until that obvious time. It was like, this happened, like, the obvious. So I said, well, we're gonna really twist and embed a token, and we're gonna go to the biggest sport. In fact, the biggest community in the world. And for people in North America, they love soccer and whatnot, but people who are living in Europe, and you lived in Europe, and I've lived in Europe for a long time, there is no other, basketball is second, but football is the sport, and that's all. It's hard to even relate the passion level if you haven't lived in Europe of how insanely passionate they are about that sport. It's more than religion. And
Yeah.
so it's the heart of a European community. If you drive through the Czech Republic, every little town's got, it's really just a pillar of society. 3.2 billion person community around the world. It's bigger than any country.
Wow.
It's bigger than any religion.
That's massive.
So if you're going to create a social network, a dedicated social network for the love of a sport, which there is an opening for that, right? I mean, people do use Instagram and Facebook and Twitter to follow football, soccer. But those tools are not built for that. So if we felt that we could actually field a product that was better than Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and is tuned to football, and that has a revenue sharing model powered with a token. And that is where, the collision of all these forces, you can see it's a bit of a perfect storm. We have to continue to actualize this, but you can't ask for better ingredients to work with, right? I mean, we're up there in Wembley Arena with the best equipment and the biggest, sound system, and it's up to us to really not drop the ball, and scare the crowd away. We have to, continue to play the fan favorites and listen to the feedback. But yeah, I mean, it's super powered potential for, it's one of those things like, I guess, bobsledding, right? You're pushing at the beginning very, very hard. And we're now in the phase where it's starting to go, and we're just going to have to jump in and hold on for dear life. And I think the implications of it, even maybe this video will go around afterwards and people will say, wow, he wasn't kidding, it will come out of nowhere. People won't know. They'll think, what is that? And you have to keep in your perspective the following thing, that Bitcoin, the community is super powerful. And, I'm not, again, as I keep saying, I'm totally pro Bitcoin and love the Bitcoin people. But really, it's only 7 million people. Now, this is a very powerful group. I live in the Greek islands, and, Greece is 12 million people. Bitcoin is like a country, 7 million people of incredibly intelligent, dedicated, pioneering people. So they're very, and now it's gaining a lot of finance people, right? So it's saying that community is very, very powerful. But that is a small community, and it did take 10 years to get that community. And now the next bridge is, what about the other 6 billion people? What kind of thing can they understand? Because it's a very difficult topic to explain Bitcoin and trading, and it's very complex, right? So there's a huge barrier of, super smart people and progressive thinking, and then just the common person going, I don't know, Bitcoin, how do I even get it? What's a wallet? What's a secret key? How do I trade? Well, I have no idea if this is real. They're telling me that it's not real. It's volatile. I know. So actually, there's an opportunity to go in there and create a community much, much bigger than Bitcoin, really, really quickly. And we don't know how that will materialize. As that's part of the process. So far, so good. We feel like the bobsled ride has started up because, we kicked it off in Cyprus at a beer festival, which is about as good of a place. If you can't sell,
That's awesome.
if you can't give away free beer in a football social network in a football crazy island, but that's what we did. We sponsored a beer festival with music that you would download the app, earn the tokens, and then buy beer at the festival. And we got 5,000 people to do it in a few days. Then it's kept spreading through the island, and more businesses wanted to access the user base. So we got 100 businesses that were accepting our token at €5 per token. They would accept a limited amount. They wouldn't accept unlimited payment. They would say €200 per month, €1,000 per month. But people here were kind of really amazed at it, because you would sit in a coffee shop, make predictions, earn points, do things in the app, invite a few friends, and go across the street and buy diapers for your kid or eat dinner, and that was the first time. A lot of them, 99.9% of our user base was not even understanding what is crypto at all, right? Yet they were using it, holding it, and they started to see the fever. So we were playing in the mainstream audience that you wouldn't have the chance to convert those people to Bitcoin for another 5 years. Yet we got them all in 60 days. And now in the last month, I think we picked over 100,000 people up around the world. Now, some of those are more Bitcoin and stellar savvy people. We're picking up a young, progressive. This wave has been a bit more crypto oriented. Unfortunately, it's been also attracting all kinds of hackers and scammers, because I guess I got to give them credit for recognizing us first. At least they recognized us first, and we're spending 60% of our days fending off huge hacker attacks and scam attacks, and just they probe and test every single flaw in your system. They pressure it and try to squeeze tokens out of you. Yeah, so we're off on a very good start, and there are certain events that can make us break out into the mainstream, just like overnight, coming up. And this crisis has affected it and made us kind of modify plans, but in some ways even accelerated how fast we're going to be able to go out to market, because now the football clubs are under a lot of financial pressure. And we talk to a lot of clubs, try and explain to them tokens, try and explain to them social media, two subjects they don't understand. And they were intrigued, but we couldn't get any real partner action from them. But now that they're all kind of financially crushed and worried about the next year's revenue as well as the losses they had this year, and also because they're at home quarantined, you can get them in Zoom and talk to them. They have time. We have found that we've got some traction with clubs that could catapult us into the mainstream really, really fast.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love it. I think it's so cool. Yeah, what a massive industry. It's a very smart way to jump in and connect to more people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing. So I have the app open here on my phone. For those listening on the podcast, you can't see my screen, but for those watching on the video, I have my app open here on the phone. I'm just taking a look around, and I've set my team that I follow to Milan, right? Because I live in Rome, so I chose Milan. And I see one of the first things that pops up here is a score. So the scores from the games they've been on, and I go into menus and I can see all sorts of stuff here. You want to walk us through a couple of the things that you have going on inside this app? Like, what can I do inside here?
We tried to make kind of a greatest hits of social media and wrap it around football. And so there's the series of, it's really like 6 apps in one. It's Reddit and Twitter and Instagram and Apple Pay, but with a crypto wallet, and a predictions game, and chat rooms like Telegram, and football data like from Sport Radar or like FootMob or something. All of those rolled into one. It's a massive technical feat. And, because these are proven things, and if they're used in the right context, these are just tools, and the subject matter is clear. You get in there, you focus on the football club that you care about, and there's discussions around the football club you care about, and also crypto-oriented TFC chat rooms for every country. And these are good. Like, just when I started the call here, we have something called Midnight Madness. It's midnight, it was midnight here when we started our call, and we give away tokens. They have to guess a number and be the first at midnight to guess a number 1 through 7, and then we give away 2,500 TFC tonight, which on the island can be spent at €5 each, right? So that's a lot of horsepower we were throwing out to the community tonight. Yeah. And these chat rooms are alive, and so that's why even during, there's no football matches right now, but the app has kept its activity level up and growth up through this, because we are a social network. We're a football themed social and communication and gaming network with a token where you earn this stuff for free, and with a button so that even if people don't understand exchanges or crypto exchanges or buy, sell, they hit the spend button there. It was where you had the wallet up there.
Mm-hmm.
And there are businesses that you can literally walk in and pay with the TFC. You can go to KFC in Cyprus, or you can go to Farmer Boys in Southern California and buy hamburgers at 5 or 6 of their restaurants in Los Angeles. So, and we're expanding this because this model is organic. We've really just bartered off the ad value. Yeah, we've said to the brand, you want to reach the audience, you have to accept, instead of paying us $5,000 for the ads, give $3,000 of accept $3,000 of TFC at $5.50 from our user base. Yeah, and we get enough money to pay our bills from the other that they still had to pay with TFC, just like BA Token and Brave. So it's the more users we have, the more businesses who will come in, and it's just built into the machine. And now we're bringing football clubs that can also potentially accept TFC, and we're asking some of them whether they will make TFC the only way to pay for tickets. So this is kind of like, we're really going for it. You only, unless we're reincarnating, you only live once.
We can go down that rabbit hole on a different one, I think.
Prize, right? Just go for it.
Yeah, totally go for it, man. Of course. I mean, imagine the power that you're giving the whole community. Like you're giving them something tangible that they can create for themselves and then spend. Like right here, I open it up here in my wallet, and I right there, KFC pops up. Right? I can just jump into a KFC, get myself a burger. Army Shop, Coffee for You, Black Sugar, all these cool stores and stuff.
There's places there all around the world. And this is only after 120 days. And this is with just a small team of developers and myself and my co-founder. We're really just kind of at the stage of, Google was 2 or 3 people, and then they hired 6 or 7, they were 10. But they didn't have to build out on the ground, right? We're like a small team, like 10, 12 people. And we're kind of doing the work of 100 right now, but that's how it is. We signed up for it, and this is the phase we're in, right?
Yeah.
And so the more liquidity that we get on exchanges, and that we can kind of really turbocharge the ecosystem and start building out more teams of people that can sign up more businesses in more countries. We have a partner in Czech Republic that has a point of sale system, and it's implemented at 20,000 bars, restaurants, and shops in Czech Republic, right? So we're actually working on integrating into that point of sale. So not many people, and yet no one knows about us. Yet we're on the edge of being in 100 restaurants in California and having pipes into 20,000 restaurants and bars in the heart of Europe with potential partners, right? And literally nobody knows about us. And partly that's because we're on a Greek island, and we sort of did this on our own money with we didn't take any VC money. It was all friends, personal networks. It was a lot of money was put into it, but we didn't have to go down that VC channel. And we're a bunch of ringers, and we borrowed 15 years of our previous work and recycled it as well. Just like you can't build something to compete with Instagram in 2 years, but if you borrow your greatest hits of 15 years as a technology team, you can actually field something impressive. And it still took 2-3 years to weld it all together on top. So so I mean, we've really chosen the high difficulty. As like I joked with Jan about, we're skiing Kitzbühel at night. I mean, this is what we're doing, and we've made it around the first turn. We're standing in a tree.
Wow. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Kitzbühel, it's the world's most dangerous, scary alpine downhill ski race. And it'll make the most competent, world-class athlete shit in his pants. Just ask Jan, right? That's a great analogy. Skiing it at night. And oh boy, I can imagine that. It's crazy. Well, that's very cool. Right. It's funny. We were just, as you were explaining the different parts of the app, I'm actually in here chatting with Jan inside the app. So it's like a messenger also, right? You can chat with your communities and talk to people. Hey.
Yeah. I think we'll be the absolute dominant chat room for the Arsenal fans. I mean, it's custom built. So, these clubs are using Twitter and Instagram for external communication. They have Facebook pages, then they have WhatsApp groups, Viber groups, and Telegram groups. And none of those tools are really built to handle their specific use case. So we just combined them all. And I do feel that we will absolutely dominate the fan communication with a club like Arsenal or Manchester City or Liverpool, where, it's hard for, Americans again, and North Americans in general, excluding Mexico, to understand the insanity. We were talking about Singapore before. And last time I was in Singapore, it was during when Liverpool was in the finals, and the entire 3 floors of the hotel was booked out. There were entire pavilions of display. People had paid to advertise to the Liverpool fans. There was thousands of Liverpool fans in a hotel, and this was happening all through Asia, like the absolute intensity of the passion for those clubs. And we're gonna harness that and steer it into these chat rooms that are inside the app, and allow those people to tokenize. And then, of course, these are the people that all the brands want to interact with. So we're just going to allow that model to rapidly shake out. And but that is one of our strongest suits, is that communication side. Because, the data side is great, but, the communication around football, that's intense. And the second big hit in that app is the predictions. And it's been cool, because it was one of our points we didn't want to just attract 23-year-old guys to the app. We wanted it to be young and old, male and female, all ranges and sizes and shapes of of all humanity, to be able to interact in there and have fun, because everybody kind of enjoys football to something, or it becomes a topic or something. So one thing everybody likes to do is predict the match, 2-0, 1-1, whatever. And we gamified that. So you make predictions, you win points to convert it to the token, and you see how you compare it against your friends, and you can socially share your prediction and you're winning the result with your friends. And it's very simple, but it's just well done. And that is kind of the big kind of hit song on the app, although the app really does have a number of hit songs on it, because it's got a lot of aspects. But between the chat area that you're talking about and that predictions area, those are the big drivers that I think are going to carry it, into we're hoping a Twitter-sized user base.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great place for people to come together and just be active, right? Like, what do you think the score is going to be? This is going to be this, and let's talk about it and let's communicate. And you're right. I mean, I'm in a million different channels for a million different things. You got an Instagram over here, you got your Telegram group here, you got your WhatsApp group over there, right? You're jamming it all together, and it's all congruent, and you can earn tokens just by being in there and doing it. So it's like, I can see it so clearly. Thank you for explaining it so deeply. It makes so much sense. And I think the world is completely going in this direction. I think it's for sure the solution to this debaucherous monetary system that we have. Communities coming together, creating their own value and their own ecosystems, right?
And another reason that people should kind of root for us and support us, because not that many people know us, and anything new, there's always some level of resistance. It's the first instinct of all the Bitcoin people going, oh, it's got to be a shit coin, partly because they're scared that other ecosystems can come up and compete. They shouldn't be scared about that. It's not an irrelevant point. And Bitcoin is powerful, and it's gonna be powerful. There are going to be other things that come up there and compete, but the model that we're doing is likely to influence Facebook and other things in a positive direction, and Telegram, and they will have to do it the way we're doing it, because people will go, hey, it can be done. These guys shared the revenue and give away the tokens. Why do I have to buy Libra? And then who's getting all the economic benefit of that? So we're actually putting, we're setting, we're the pace setter for now. We intend to be the winning horse, but we're certainly doing the pace setting right now and showing people the model that you can share the revenue with the user and monetize the value of the token and give away the revenue. And then what happens is beautiful, because you don't then have to rely on the ad revenue as the engine for everything, which immediately leads to invasion of privacy. If you're trying to maximize the advertising value of a network, it inevitably leads to raiding people's privacy. And, you know, it would be shocking for people who don't know how that works. They all are suspicious of it, but it's probably even worse than they think. That if you were in a room in the future with me, and we were, and I will never be doing this, but if there was Pepsi and Coke both sitting there going, hey, we want to give you ad budget, but tell me, what can you offer me? And what they're going to ask for would be surprising, which is why we're not ever going to go in that direction, because we don't want to invade the user's privacy. You know, we monetize in a different way. We do a very generic advertising that's good for the simple community, that doesn't require invasion of privacy, because we don't need that money. We just allow it as a community service for the business, and we give that money to the community. The app actually makes its money from upgrades and from the monetization of the token itself. And, you know, I keep getting people, it's kind of funny, you know, well, how do you make money? You know, they say, if you're giving away the ad revenue, how do you make money? And the joke is really on them, because the easiest way to make money is to make money. And we're doing. And, you know, legally, I would deny. And if I'm ever hauled in front of Congress, I just said that as a joke, really, in a sense that it's not really money. It's still a token. It's a utility token. But the sense that, to the degree that it measures, you know, some sort of economic transaction, this is what a utility token does, right? The New York subway token measures the value of riding on the subway. So in the end of the day, we make money from the economic value that comes from the token. And this is totally valid. People can't get their head around it, but it's real. Yeah, the Bitcoin people know, you know.
Yeah.
The rest of the world doesn't quite understand that yet, but we'll show them. You know, it's a viable model, and it's actually incredibly lucrative. That's not what's driving the project, but we're aware of the economics, you know, that are in it, and it's good for everybody, you know, to create the abundance and let the economics flow through that ecosystem.
Yes, exactly. I want to leave it right there, because that was the icing on the cake. The abundance. Say that again. Wrap it up for us, because that was perfect.
Yeah, we want to let the abundance just flow through the ecosystem. Let the human energy just circulate and go round. No artificial dams and stopping. Let the energy flow.
Yes, perfect. I love it. Steve, so much. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Growth Podcast. This has been very enlightening, inspiring, and I'm just super proud of you guys for doing this, putting it out there, and you know, making the world a better place, and just being a beacon of light. It's just amazing, Steve. It's been a pleasure to meet you as well.
Same. Thanks, Aaron. I really appreciate you really letting me go that deep into the ether there.
Absolutely. I love it. Can't go deep enough. I want to have you back on in the future, Steve. And when I come over to Europe again, my wife and I are back to normal. We're coming to visit you. We're going to go over there and chat a little deeper, if we say so.
We'll bring over to Cyprus, and everyone that I bring over leaves at least 5 pounds heavier. It's part of mandatory cuisine here.
That sounds fine with me. I'm looking forward to it. All right. So thanks again so much, Steve. And by the way, everyone, in the show notes, we'll have links to the app and all of the goodies down there. You can find Steve and everything he's doing in the show notes. So go find that now. Thanks again, Steve, for joining us on the Growth Podcast.
Cheers, man.